Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're with Porcupine Real Estate. We're going to be talking about investment real estate in New Hampshire. And basically, this is designed for you, the listeners and the viewers, to share with the group your experiences, and we'll do the same. It's sort of like a mastermind group of best practices for landlords, investors, even tenants, if you're on that side of the equation. We'd like to hear from other property owners, what we're doing, what we're finding that works and doesn't work. Also get an update on the market. So my name is Mark Warden of Porcupine Real Estate. Our other co-host is Brittany Ping. Brittany, please introduce yourself.
Yep. So my name is Brittany Ping. I'm the director of property management. That means I just work on other people's investments. We do third-party property management. I'm also an investor here in Manchester. So I'm excited to talk more about what I do.
Okay, that's great. And my background is I've been in real estate for about 30 years. Used to sell real estate in Las Vegas, Nevada. Moved to the Free State in 2007. Porcupine Real Estate has done over 450 transactions in New Hampshire. A lot of single families, a lot of multifamilies, but I've also been an investor in other states, including Alabama, and through some syndications. So by way of background, that's kind of where we are. And what we'd like to do is quickly have each of the guests introduce themselves. You don't have to, but if you'd like to say hi, just tell us, where you live, how many properties you own. That way others can benefit from your experience. We're going to start with James, and then Robert, and then Frank. So as I call your name, unmute and tell us who you are and where you are. James, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have one property that I live in and no investment properties as of yet, but I am looking.
Great. Thank you and welcome. Robert, I know you own Nashua, Manchester, and is it Keene yet? So tell us, give us an update on your properties. You have to unmute and tell us what you're doing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, driving, so things might be a little choppy. So yeah, right. I own, as Mark just said, I own a property in Nashua, Manchester, and Keene. And right now I'm actually going to my Nashua property to do some work on a lower unit that's currently in a turn. So yeah, going for a lot of expenses right now. In my Keene place, I'm getting a service meter done, and part of the rehab in my Nashua place is I have a wicked old furnace that needs to be done. So yeah, I guess where I am is burning a lot of cash on rehabs.
Yeah, thanks for that update. I know it's been a challenge at that property. You get good rents when it's rented, but it's always tough. So we'd like to hear more. Maybe some of the other people in the group will have some ideas on some way to save money on replacing a boiler. So thank you and welcome. Frank, are you still here? Oh, it looks like Frank dropped off.
Yeah.
If Frank
he's in your waiting room again.
I haven't seen him yet.
Okay.
If he comes back in, he's a client of both Brittany's and mine, and we'll have him introduce his properties when he comes back in. So let's start out with state of the market right now. Where are we? Brittany, you have your finger on the pulse because you're talking to tenants every day.
Yeah.
We have some other landlords here on the group. So share with them what you're seeing in regards to vacancy rates, and are landlords able to continue to raise rents, or has that leveled off?
So I would say I'm really, first off, I'm a little upset because New Hampshire Housing State of the Rental Survey should be out. It's not out. So I can tell you what I think it is, and it literally could come out tomorrow and we're going to actually see. So oh my gosh, woo, all our phones. I really do think that we are at about a 1 to 2% vacancy rate in the Hillsborough County area. I think that that's really recent. So I do think that the trend that we've seen the past few years, where we are at a 1% vacancy rate across the state, is going to maintain. I have not seen as much pressure. I've seen everyone be a little bit nervous about an impending recession. And so the stability over the hitting market, right? Vacancies will absolutely be at that higher rate. But I would say that, you know, when I'm looking at what competition is doing, at least in the primary markets I'm in, Manchester and Concord, they're very similar to our pricing strategy. Obviously, the new build, the market rates are insane, right? But when we're talking about, you know, C-class housing, it's been pretty stable. But maybe with A-class, you know, all these new builds being so intense, like we're talking to, you know, 1 bedrooms at $2,300 per month. Yeah. So it could increase fair market. How the market's going to respond, like the C-class market, in regards to, you know, how much do we push the envelope? That will be interesting. So those HUD numbers come out in October, at the end of the federal fiscal year. We still have not seen the state information in regards to vacancy and expected median markets. So I'm really a little upset, to be honest. Normally they're out, like they're out 2 weeks ago. And so like what I think is happening in the market.
We're all libertarians here, so we can't expect much from the bureaucrats. But you know, keep in mind that a lot of these statistics are county-wide, which really isn't that applicable in New Hampshire, because
Yeah.
counties aren't that big and they're so diverse in regards to the sub-markets. Certainly Manchester, Nashville, you have a good feel for it. But if you have a rental in, I don't know, Antrim or Peterborough, something's going to be different. Well, Frank, we want to welcome you to the call. If you don't mind, the others have introduced themselves. It's up to you whether you want to or not. If you just want to tell us, you know, a bit about where you live, but also your properties here. And the idea tonight is to share our experience as landlords and investors to benefit the group. And then we're going to have a mastermind discussion.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm on a little late. I'm Frank. I've been investing in New Hampshire since 2016. Been using Ledgeview for the whole time. I currently have 4 buildings and 20 units.
And then Bob Boucher, he is somebody we know from Ledgeview Commercial. He's also joined in. If you want to give us a quick intro, Bob, to you and what you're doing, what your investments look like here in the state.
Yeah, I bought 2 buildings back in 2017, 4 units apiece. And then in 2019, I bought another building with 2 units. So I have 10 units in all. And I do use Ledgeview on a regular basis.
Great. Well, thank you both for sharing. So we want to cover a number of topics tonight, and then open it up for all you guys to share your pain points and your questions with the group. Because again, this is a mastermind group and it wants to be a conversational style. Oh, that's another possible tenant calling.
We just changed out our phone system. So normally they wouldn't ring here, but in order for them to go to voicemail after hours, it has to ring in the office. So
Okay, we have a loose agenda, but you guys can raise your hand or jump in at any time, you know, unmute and ask a question. But on our loose agenda, one of the things we wanted to talk about was the lead paint situation, especially because a couple of people on this call tonight have personal experience with that. So, Brittany, why don't you start and tell us where we are in regards to what the lead paint challenge is for landlords in New Hampshire with such an old housing stock.
yes.
And what that caveat is for investors.
Yes. So, and this is something that, you know, it feels like an old hat to me, right? Like I'm familiar. You know, obviously I've worked with our clients on, you know, lead orders, things like that. I feel like one of the things that, so I brought two different clients recently, you know, kind of in the onboarding conversations, and they've said, oh, you know, I've got that disclosure in my lease, I'm all set. Or I send them the pamphlet, I'm all set. And I'm like, there is a form. There is a form that needs to be signed. You know, are you keeping these? And so just making sure that you understand your disclosure requirement. Everybody here, well, most of you here, I know that you're doing it right, because I've assisted you, you know, but it was just shocking to me Making sure that you're not just presenting them with a pamphlet and the disclosure for lead-based paint hazards and radon hazards in the state of New Hampshire in your lease language, but also providing them with the proper lead-based paint disclosure for rentals and leasing. And that is before they initiate a contract with you, before they are required to, perform on the contract. And one of the reasons why I added that little caveat that before they are required to perform and sign your contract is because the EPA is spending millions of dollars targeting City of Manchester landlords to understand why we have such a high lead poisoning level rate. So 90% of the cases in the state are coming from the City of Manchester. So it's been pretty crazy.
Yeah, Carolyn, you have a question? Okay, I just want to throw in a little anecdote. And that is that I was in the State House back in several years ago, but there were a lot of new legislation coming forth about reducing the blood lead level threshold under which you'd have to put a residential property under order. You'd have to report it to the state, I think it's DES or the health department, and then they would come in and make you remove all the lead paint. So I'll remind those people who just joined this call that this is being recorded. So we certainly want to watch what we say. Of course, Brittany and I are licensed, so we know what things not to say and what things to say, but we also want you to be honest and authentic and ask your questions. My personal story is I got out of the business a little bit too early because I was worried about this legislation I saw coming in from the Democrats mainly. And I said, oh, they're going to come after all the old buildings in New Hampshire. And if I have to spend 20 grand, and some of you are going to tell me it's a lot more than that, but if I spend whatever the number is
20 grand per unit now.
this is 8 years ago. So I started liquidating my old houses that Brittany managed for me in 2018, 2019, too early, right? I should have waited. I just waited 2 more years. I could have made a lot more money, but I was nervous because of this thing coming down the pike of new legislation. So it's a consideration and it's a caveat or a danger we all want to be aware of when investing in real estate. That said, a lot of you have been through it. So, don't let that stop you.
Yeah, it's I'm working, I think, on the 5th lead abatement situation. It's a 6 unit in Manchester. I'm working on that for an owner right now. And they're not, that's why I always tell this owner, like, that's why you pay me. It's not easy. It's not fast. It's not fun. This instance, I mean, we're almost a year into the order on the house. It's just trying to do what DHHS, is expecting of the property owner and to do what's best for the property. So when we do come out of this lead order, it is performing for this owner and it is safe, for families, hopefully for the rest of its existence.
Hey, Brittany, maybe we can give a little bit of advice to first-time multifamily investors, just like James, even though Robert has some experience, hasn't been that long. Should they avoid a house that is lead paint, or what are we seeing out there in the market? What do most sellers actually disclose? And is it only a problem if a child comes up with high lead paint, or eventually they're just going to come down hard on all landlords of old buildings?
So here's the thing. We're going to see, so there was actually a law July 1, it went into effect, all new housing. So all change of use, all new construction right now has to be certified lead safe. So
wait, not new construction.
No, like new conversion.
New conversion.
Right,
sorry,
so
remodel,
right.
renovation. Yeah.
Well, that's how it's written. But we all know it's not how the intent of the law, it's the enforcement of the law. So I met with a new client and they have a carriage house and they're like, wouldn't this be awesome as a studio? And we're looking at it and we're like, yeah, but it's going to have to be certified lead safe. Just understanding what it means. I think that there's a lot of no knowledge, no reports out there in regards to lead-based paint hazards. I don't think that's a thing to be afraid of. I think what it is an opportunity for you to understand what your responsibility is when it comes to learning about lead-based paint. That's one of the things the EPA is focusing on is education, right? When should you be getting a lead-based paint test? You know, at what work, you know, making sure you're hiring certified contractors to remove lead, and knowing that, you know, the person who can identify lead is a licensed lead inspector. Right?
That's right. Basically, we want investors to go in eyes wide open that this is out there. There are a lot of factors and challenges and threats to your investment. This is just one of many. Robert Farinelli has his hand raised. Why don't you unmute Robert and add your comment, please?
Oh, I was just going to say, for people like me who are like self-managing, back at the end of June, I actually got RRP certified to get ahead on some of my property to do some work to so that lead is not an issue. So I guess I just want to say that on lead, it's better to get ahead than to get caught in a lead order later, because it's probably going to cost, like, I've heard, like 3x the amount versus like getting on top of it ahead of time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. There are a couple of issues here. One is there is money available out there for this lead abatement. If you have a lead paint order, or even if you want to do it voluntarily, there are grants and there are loans. So you'll want to talk to your local bureaucrats about that, because it can be mostly statewide, but some of the cities have their own programs. I think that Brittany is pretty up to date on that. So we're not saying that you should avoid an old building altogether, because after the work is done, the resale value of your property is much higher. And if, you know, when you go to sell it down the road, a buyer will say, if it's already been lead abated, that it's a lot more valuable because you don't have to worry about that.
And one of the
Frank, if you want to jump in, you can. It's optional because he's been through this. But yeah, go ahead. Tell us what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I went through a lead certification on a building, and yeah, one of the things I definitely recommend is don't get into it. So what I have Brittany do now is every time there's a unit turn, any touch-ups or painting that needs to be done, I always ask her to first apply lead blocking paint, because I think with the lead blocking paint, you have the bitterant in there, and that's like a big deterrent for kids putting things in their mouth. The other thing, that the mistake I made with the estimates, I did go with the grant, but I should have gotten a price through the grant and also through a private contractor so I could compare prices better. By the time the grant already went through, I was kind of running out of time as far as how long I had to get compliant. So then I had to accept their terms, even though I felt that those contractors' prices were very expensive. But then by then it was too late to get a price from somebody else.
Wow, that advice is worth the price of admission tonight. This call, guys. It's super important to ask people who've been through this. There's actually a friend of ours who's a free stater who now has a lead, what is it, Brittany, lead testing company?
So yeah, so she is a licensed lead inspector. So she's a licensed lead risk inspector. So she's the person that comes in with the X-ray gun and identifies, you know, a wall, top, joist, you know, that is lead positive. That is a hazard that needs to be abated.
So you guys as investors, when you're buying a building, you can actually ask for a lead test inspection if the seller allows that as part of your negotiations, your offer. You can do that as part of your normal inspection process. Most sellers won't, but if they do it. I'd spend it's not cheap. It's probably $1,000, but do it to avoid multiples of that in the future, and also it helps your negotiating position for that purchase.
Also, a thing is, if you get the knowledge, so if you do hire a licensed lead risk inspector, right, in the instance of a lead order, you are required to abate it at the time. But you can obtain knowledge of a lead-based paint hazard, right, on a non-chip, right, in just, it's not, is it indemnification? What's the one where you just kind of keep it in its current condition? Right, not abatement, but you continue to maintain so it does not deteriorate. Right, so you would always disclose in a rental or sale that you have knowledge of lead-based paint hazards. but unlike a lead order, you voluntarily got that information. And it's something you can disclose. I will say one of the positives of I know it's not, I know it's a lot of money, but one of the positives is that we do have a lot of people moving from out of state when you're talking about the rental market, and they are expecting lead safe units. So it is a surprise to them when I have to let them know that, if it's, I have no knowledge or no reports, or, whatever it might be, that is a surprise. And then so, if you're one of the owners that are on the edge of this, because a lot of our properties are not converted to certified lead safe, it is a positive in the rental market.
I think it's a great point. We don't want to belabor this, but even though it's an expense, maybe it's you can charge a premium for rent. So we're not trying to talk people out of being investors. Just go in eyes wide open, talk to somebody like Brittany or myself, before doing it, before pulling the trigger, and the numbers can still work really well. Brittany, why don't we move on to something else on our agenda, and that's about evictions. I hate to start out with all the negatives because there's a lot of good things about being a property owner, and maybe we'll talk about some of the tax advantages in a minute. But give us a brief update about the process in New Hampshire. Can a landlord like Robert, who self-manages, can he do it himself, or do you need an attorney?
So you really can do it yourself. Obviously, I don't want to give you legal advice. I work with an attorney 9 times out of 10 with our owners. But we can evict for a few. This is kind of like on the nose a little bit. I have an owner that I just assisted with an eviction for other good cause for lease violations, right? And getting that delivery out there. So just knowing the reasons that you can evict. So we can evict for 30 days for other good cause. Like if the owner intends to sell. So those are 4 specifically listed things. The courts have a pre-created form for your eviction notices. You always use that, or the exact same thing. I'm telling you, letter by letter, word by word, space by space. If you're going to create your own, the courts want to see exactly their template. So that's what we do. We actually have it on our own, but it's it's the court's document. I just don't use their PDF. So those could be things like the owner intent to sell, other good costs. Not as intent to renovate. That's another big one for other good costs.
Let's say somebody doesn't pay his rent on, well, the rent's
Oh, wait,
due
we'll get to I want to touch on one more. So then there's material conditions of the lease. So if you have someone that is continuing to violate the lease, so this one we had an assignment in subletting unauthorized occupants. So making sure that you have a strong lease so that you can, when people are doing things wrong, you can hold them accountable for the specific terms of their lease. And then you can escalate to an eviction specifically on the material terms of the lease that they have violated, that you've documented. 7-day health and safety eviction is also on the court forms. That is if, so we've actually had a 7-day health and safety eviction, unfortunately, but we've been through it, where a gentleman came in and threatened to shoot anybody who came onto the rental property that he lived in. Luckily, the courts acted quickly in our favor. We said you have 7 days to get out. You cannot threaten to shoot my employees, right? The owner's agent, into our office. And so the courts allowed, it's a quick escalation to a court case, much faster than, the other reasons. And so we did get possession of that unit based on that behavior that jeopardized the health and safety of the property or the owner's agent or the owner themselves. And then there's non-payment. So we still have a little bit of the COVID era stuff. So if your property accepts Section 8, if they accept federal money for rent, or if you have like an FHA or a VA or some other, you fall along the CARES Act of 2020. So I've got to think back 2019, 2020. You do have to have a 30-day elimination. That one's a little just sticking point. The courts do want to see it. Just know that you're in compliance. That is on all the court forms. Like, no, you may be required for 30 days. Otherwise, it's a 7-day elimination demand. You'd send a demand for rent and that eviction notice together. And honestly, Manchester is probably the most backed up court, and we are much faster now. We're probably we are hand delivering these to the sheriffs ourselves. And the sheriffs are out delivering the next day right now. So,
That was some brilliant advice you just gave
sorry,
about.
lots of things. Evictions, there's ways to evict. One of the things that I see, if you're new or you're thinking about it, is, and Mark can talk about this from a legislative standpoint, that's not been successful, is the end of the lease is not a reason to evict anyone. So tenancy is tenancy. You can only evict for the reasons that we just talked about there. I don't think I missed one, but just disclosure, I might have missed one, but non-renewal is not a reason. End of lease is not a reason.
Yeah,
Well, one of the pearls of advice you offered there is that if they break the lease, it gives you one more reason to take them to court. So not only a tight lease, but maybe something with more restrictions in it, just going to help you in the long run. So that was, I think, again, worth the price of admission for that piece of advice. Thank you.
if I can hop in. I just, again, I'm self-managing a property, not really knew what I'm doing, particularly through the time, got into it a little quickly. But I wound up using a lawyer to evict for purpose of resale. And for the 2-unit, it did run me about just under 3,000, and it was worth every single penny. Because there were so many things I might not have been aware of. I had a very hostile relationship with the one tenant, the one who paid on time and such. But not having to talk, we did wind up going to mediation. And there were just so many things that I would have, it was a way to know that I was crossing all my T's, dotting my I's, and not stepping out. Because even as far as when he sent the eviction notices to one to both of the tenants in both units, and any other person, I never would have known that you had to do cover in case there was anybody else.
Yeah.
It was perfect having somebody in the mediation. And it was wonderful because that tenant never spoke to me from October of last year. Everything had to be in writing or text until the mediation. And again, just the personal, not having to have that personal confrontation was worth every penny. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
It's not a smooth golden path being a landlord. There are always bumps along the way.
Right.
I'd like to hear from some of our investors in the group about maybe what was one of the best pieces of advice or the worst piece of advice you ever heard about investing in real estate. Anybody want to share? Frank?
Yeah,
Easy.
I'll make a quick comment about the evictions. I think it's really important to have somebody on your side. Like I have Ledgeview, and one of the best things about that is you have somebody as a buffer between you and the tenant. It can be a very emotional experience. I know my dad was involved in landlording and he tried to do everything himself, and I saw him become very frustrated, make mistakes. With Brittany, Brittany can blame me and the tenant doesn't know any better, or I can blame her, and there's always that buffer between us. So there's not an emotional aspect to it. It's just everything's by the books, and you can do what you have to do. But fortunately, I haven't really had a problem. The tenants are well vetted. We both get to look at the application. So I feel like the more eyes that are on paperwork or on the building, the better you can get things done.
Great comment. Thank you.
Robert, you have a comment?
Oh yeah. I've heard some very stupid advice out there recently. Anyone who's buy for appreciation. Yeah. Good luck with that when you decided that I want to buy something for appreciation. You lose $200 a month and then, a furnace breaks or something. Where's your money?
Yeah, that's right. Sad but true. That's a good warning to others that you need to have some reserves. You need to have a buffer there for future expenses, because no matter how good your home inspection is, you just never know when something's going to fail. I'm trying to think of some good advice. I've heard some good advice that I've heard has to do with taxes. Like if you have a day job and you're making decent money in your day job, it's nice to have some write-offs. And with rental real estate, you can take advantage of some appreciation where you can still have some small positive cash flow. But because of the depreciation write-off, it doesn't count on paper. It's not a profit. It doesn't add to your taxable income, right? I'm not a tax attorney. I'm not a CPA. Talk to your own individual tax professional. But I think that was really great advice. And it's a great way to build wealth long-term. But I also, to Robert's point, I don't want people to buy thinking they're gonna make 10% in the next 2 years, right? Never bank on that. You should analyze a rental property based on its current cash flow, expected cash flow, write in some expected maintenance and repairs. And if it still makes sense, then go for it. But don't just buy for appreciation.
Yeah, and I think you know, kind of knowing, like knowing how long. Those are kind of. I like when I talk to an owner and I'm like, hey, I'm so sorry, a water tank went out. And he's like, oh yeah, I think all of them in the basement are like 2011. So I think I've done pretty good so far. Like you knowing what it is and having that in your mind when you bought it, like, oh, that's gonna die, right? Like I should start planning for that end of life. And then also on the other hand, when you we recently sold our multifamily just about a year and a half ago, but we bought a roof and I was like, yeah, we get to write all of it off. And a tax person was like, no, you don't. You get $100 off a year for the next 20 years of your life. And I was like, oh, so also just understanding like what actually you get to write off in a big chunk. Cause we were so excited, like, yes, no, did not happen. So, prepare for a little bit of heartbreak, but also, I was really surprised when that owner and I said, I think this is happening. They said, it's good. I know the age of everything in that basement. Woo, that's helpful, right? I don't have to deliver as bad a news if you already knew that all these are going to go in the next few years.
Yeah, that's all helpful information for our group. Here's another agenda we have on our list is where do you guys advertise your vacancies? I'd love to hear from people who don't use a property manager, like Carolyn and Robert, as well as from Brittany. What works, what doesn't work?
I'll say right now, just from a PM standpoint, so we've adjusted pretty hard. Facebook was really our number one for a long time, and then Facebook adjusted their rules. And so we had to go chase who the next big one was. Right now, we're finding that's Zillow. But with Zillow has come bots. So we've had to almost automate some of our process where now I have to touch them as a real human. This isn't a negative, right? That's why everyone pays me. But I had to de-automate because our primary source is filled with bots that will take up all of your showing times. And because we show in real life, instead of sending them out, with a code box, they're wasting my time. So it's adaptive. At least it's been in my experience. And like these, I don't know. I don't understand the technology behind it, but they're just automated, fake email addresses, names, phone numbers, taking showings, just as fast as they're available. So we've had to make changes based on that.
Carolyn, how did you find your first tenant?
The first,
Do you recall?
the downstairs tenant was the son of the owner that sold it. They stayed there, so there was no problem with that. And the second one was referred to by a friend for somebody who was looking for temporary housing. So my original intent was I was going to have the upstairs unit just as short-term rentals. And I wound up with somebody who I thought was going to be there 6 months, who was there a year and a half. So it worked out okay, but I don't know. And I think there were enough questions about my place being available because of the upper one being a small unit.
It also depends a bit on your location.
Right.
In Carolyn's instance, it's a very busy road. So if you had a vacancy, you put a sign out there, you'd probably get a number of responses just from that. But if you're in a cul-de-sac, it's going to be a different story.
And my rent was it was so low. I mean, the second unit was just a 650 square foot, 1 bedroom that was renting at 800, which it's low, but it was fair. I mean, very fair and very reasonable for this area.
Great, thanks for sharing. Hey, Robert, I don't know if you're in a better sell area now, but since you self-manage, do you put your vacancies up on Zillow? And if, where else would you put it besides Zillow?
So I usually do, well, actually, I have very recently, I just filled one in Keene. So, I did, Facebook Marketplace, Zillow, and Craigslist. I'd say about 70% was, of the respondents was Facebook Marketplace, 30 was Zillow, and I got like basically nothing out of, Craigslist. So Facebook Marketplace definitely worked the best for me.
I'm a boomer, so I don't understand anything but Facebook, but maybe the young people on here, I think are Brittany and Robert, with apologies to James, but you two, is TikTok a thing or Instagram? Is that a place to advertise these things or not?
No.
No?
I've seen homes advertised more on those platforms, right? Like, come join this open house. I'm in Florida. You know what I like?
Yeah.
I don't think that's as big in our market. But I definitely like agents that I've seen their reels or, you know, I don't know what TikToks are called. They're TikTok, where they're advertising like an open house for a sale. But I might as well be a boomer.
Well, let's move on to a great comment.
Yeah,
that- Go ahead,
it's-
Carolyn.
quick question, with Ledgeville Property Management, do you do anything to recruit the renters or tenants?
Yes, so we have an internal transfer system as well. So my favorite people to rent other units are people who are good paying tenants, right? So if I can
Right.
transfer them, so we do have a robust system that way. Zillow is our number one. So we push out to syndicated feeds. So we're on
Yeah.
apartments, we're on rent.com, we're on realtor.com, we're on all the syndicates. Zumper was feeding to Facebook. Facebook won't let property management, it won't let companies post on Marketplace.
Okay,
So I could personally post it, but then like it's not a line we've been willing to cross where I am
Right.
personally posting my clients' units.
but if you had but the client could do it with your knowledge, right?
Yeah. I mean,
'Cause it's something I really didn't think about, being over here on the western side of the state, an hour and a half from Manchester. It could be a problem for me to find tenants or have to screen tenants or do tenants.
we do leasing only contracts as well. Bob's familiar with me on that. You know, if you don't want to do that piece, right? But I'd say Zillow was our number 2. Facebook was our number 1 via Zumper.
Yeah,
And it was just an easy choice to go to Zillow. We pay for Zillow for all of our listings. So the owners don't see it, but we pay on the back end for Zillow listings
mhm,
so that they
okay.
get picked up no matter what. Some of the aggregators, they'll pick you up the more photos that you have. So like sometimes if you're like one of my clients and you look listen, like, why do you have 6 photos of the bedroom? Because if I have 20 photos, more aggregators will pick me up.
Okay,
It's just worth it.
And
Yeah, I mean-
for a do-it-yourself or landlord who listed on Zillow, for example, do they also offer a screening or an application process there?
Yeah, so some of those services will offer where you can accept their application. I'm not as familiar with it. It seems pretty legit, but if it fits what you're looking for, if it performs the basic function and you treat everyone the same, you shouldn't have an issue.
It's legit. I just got my most recent tenant that signed a lease through it. They all applied through Zillow. It's very legit.
Yeah, I've not heard any complaints. I just don't have any familiarity. I don't have like the one-on-one with it, you know, I'm not seeing it at the other end.
The reason why tenants like it more is because what Zillow allows them to do is they pay a $30 flat fee and they're allowed to apply to as many buildings as they want versus like paying $30 for a credit and background check per apartment. So I know that's why a lot of tenants who go through Zillow, that's why they really like to apply through it.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very helpful.
It's
Thank you.
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a barrier. Like we charge $50, but our credit vendor is $48.50. Like that's how much our background credit costs. We switched our software, had a background credit. We were finding it was not as robust as we expected it to be based on the social media checks that we do, right? Because we're looking to see if we can find any arrests or any warrants or any, right? And so when kind of 2 and 2 weren't adding up, we did switch to a different vendor that's a little bit more intensive. But that's just kind of a risk profile for us too, right? I'm not just doing, 10 units, I'm working on, 100 move-ins a year.
All right, another question we had from one of our clients offline was, what sort of tech are you guys using as landlords or property managers? I'm imagining things like cameras or the locks you can change remotely. Any good experiences here that you want to share with the group?
I do
Yeah.
have, oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Robert.
I was just about to say for like technology in terms of like, I guess technology I use within the house. So as a software engineer, I do not like anything wireless or remote that can be potentially hacked into. But what I will still use is I always use coded locks for all of my units. I don't like the idea of tenants losing keys or when a tenant moves, changing keys. I also find it very convenient for contractors. The ones I use are they're the Square Defiant ones from Home Depot. They're what, $45. I have not had a single problem with any one of them. But yeah, you can also set one-time contractor codes for there. So if like you have someone who needs to do like just today, like I set a contractor code for one of my contractors in Keene who had to get into the basement to swap out a service meter and is swapping a panel. So I can just set codes for them not having to be there. So in terms of like technology on the actual property, I like using that. In terms of managing myself, I've been starting to use some software called Door Loop. I'm not fully onboarded onto that yet. I'm still trying to figure it out, but so I can't say much to that right now, but I do like some of the features I've seen with it so far, like with setting up like my lease and rental agreement. One of the things I really liked about it was you can tell Door Loop for late fees or for charges, like how much interest to accrue. So for me in my lease, I do 15% APR for like any back owed money to me. So you can easily set that up in Door Loop. So if a tenant doesn't pay, you're not like trying to keep track of like how much money do they owe you. It's Door Loop figures that out all for you. So only the really thing I can say about it right now. Maybe if this was six months from now, I can say other things, but not much for now.
Thank you for sharing, Robert. We appreciate that. All right, we have a great question in the chat room. Maybe Brittany wants to start with this. Can we talk about finding new investment properties in this market? Come on, that's the golden ring for investors.
No. I don't think it's impossible. I think that it's a lot of looking, right? I think just like the single family market has looked for the past 4 years, now the investment market looks very similar. You're going to have to look and look and look and look and look and look. Just the 7, to 10 caps aren't just, glaringly obvious. You might find somebody that's managed something poorly, or we talked a little bit about it before everybody else joined on. Like, maybe you're willing to buy a building that needs more work because someone's already done the work on the rents, right? So just, especially if you're already kind of experienced, you know what's worked for you, or what's what's your groove in regards to the properties that you have on. I have a client that, you know, their goal was always to bring a property on, get it stable, go find the next, right? They didn't want to deal with two properties that could cause trouble at the same time. He said, I don't care if I'm pouring 100K into the property that I just picked up, I'm going to get it stable. And that means I can go get my next one. You know, and it might take longer in between. I think it's out there. You know, that 1% rate, that 1% rule, I know it's not tried and true and perfect, but it's still there. If you're looking at, you're just gonna have to deep dive more into the income flow, you know, what that listing agent is disclosing about the rent roll and known expenses, things like that. And get creative. You know, do you want to separate out water meters? You know, do you want to get to the point where you're removing the variable costs for you as an owner? Maybe it's something where everything is heat and hot water included, and it's got the capacity for you to be able to get, you know, the utilities all out. It's got an old boiler anyway, right? Am I willing to put the investment in for 3 new furnaces or 4 new furnaces and get everybody on their own? And all of a sudden, you know, my income availability at that property is skyrocketed. And I just think it's just I think the same advice that you would have given to somebody who's looking for a single family over the past 4 years is what you give to an investor now. We're just going to keep looking. We're just going to keep digging into the details of each listing, because they're all moving. You know, it's just got to find the one that's got the right sparkle for you in regards to that. You know, what's that? The ledger, right? Not the ledger, the income report, you know, like what does it look like? What is it doing as an NOI? And then, you know who you are as an investor. How are you going to make it perform better for you at the new mortgage?
There are ways to get creative out there to find off-market deals. It's not easy though. It takes legwork, takes knocking on doors. Some people I know who are so-called bird dogs will go and just bang on doors. Particularly if they see a property that looks overgrown or not maintained well, and they think maybe the seller's in distress, they'll go there. You also can do some pretty sophisticated direct mail. We can look at property records and see how long somebody's owned a property. And maybe we want to direct mail to every multifamily property in Manchester or Nashua or Concord, where the owner's owned it more than X number of years. Right, and send out. Now the response rate is not very good on those, but it's an approach. And there are a lot of people. If you go to the New Hampshire Real Estate Investors Association, which a lot of us have done in the past, you know, they have people that do specialize in wholesaling and bird dogging, and they hope to find 1 in 100, a needle in a haystack where they can make some money. But Frank, to your question, it's a lot of work. There aren't that many.
The demand is high. The supply it's there. It's just, you know, it's being honest. If you don't want to chase, it's being honest about what kind of investment you want, right? If you know the type of turnaround you want to get in that first year, you're going to have to do the work to be really sure. Because, you know, like Robert had talked about earlier, like you can just think that I'm going to be fine and I'm going to be liquid, and then a furnace dies, you know. So you might have to get a little bit pickier.
And we know an investor who is buying up properties basically at full price, but he looks at the rents and sees that they're low. So he kicks everybody out and drives up the rents to market. And that's his business plan. So if you want to try that approach, yeah, we can talk about it, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of grief, a lot of heartache, kicking out, evicting tenants who may not be able to afford anything else anywhere in another town. So there are different approaches, and you know, we're keeping our eyes on those things and always looking for the opportunities for you people.
Or, you know, like this is this is what I'm working on too. So a few years ago, I couldn't break into commercial, right? I had a friend, we wanted to buy a commercial level property together. We're thinking like 6 to 8 units, five to, whatever it was that we could get our hands buttoned, but to do a real commercial investment. And we just weren't competitive enough from the loan market. But a duplex came available at a decent price, a high price, but it had a second lot. So now 3 years later, we have a surveyor coming out hopefully in the next few weeks, and we're going to split the lots. And we're going to get a land use attorney. Hopefully the land use attorney to split the lots. And then hopefully we'll be able to build a duplex. And I've already got the capital of that second piece of land. So, for $350,000 3 years ago, I got an okay duplex, but I bought it because it had a second plot of land. And now we got it back. We got the duplex to cash flowing enough where it's paying for its own surveyor to come in. And full disclosure, it's cash flowing because I pay rent there now, but I sold my house that I lived in. It just worked out great. I pay market rent. And it all goes back into the whole plan, which is to build that next unit, and to build back up, the property of the building, because I had to evict a tenant for non-payment just like everybody else. Not immune. But I think also, like I said, finding if it's low rent, you don't have to drive people out to get them up in rent as well, right? Like this is a big thing that we did when we saw the 46 to 48% increase in rents across our portfolio in market rents and moving them all up. And so I think now our whole portfolio is about 92% to market rent without a crazy amount of turnover in the past 4 years. Like nothing above normal.
In some of the real estate investment groups, we talk about trying to repurpose a building. For example, an old mill building or a commercial space and convert it to units. I don't know if, and that is a great opportunity if you know what you're doing. I don't know if Brittany or any of the other people on this call has any experience with that. Please share, but I think that's a great opportunity if you can take the time to, work with contractors and work with the town, get that conversion going. Brittany, what are your thoughts?
It's definitely something that we've had clients put in purchase and sale offers, and they've never gotten that far, but same thing. So reimagining a mill building into 8 residential units, the architecture plans and things like that go behind it. It's what's happening in Manchester. That's where a lot of the new housing has come from. Or purchasing a plot of land in a zoning district that may have a small or even a large footprint commercial space that is, ready to be torn down, and then, doing a new construction loan on that. So you're improving the city that you're investing in addition to getting the investment that you're looking for, because you're really the one that has to make it out of thin air. So those are happening things. We have a lot of that here on the west side, the smaller plots, not big. This isn't like big pieces of land. This is, a convenience store got turned into a duplex and sold.
Another interesting opportunity that we've been discussing, Matt, Ping, and I, is the opportunity of possibly taking like a 3-plex or a 4-unit and converting the units into condos. Condo minimization, I don't know what the word is, condoization of a unit. This was popular a couple of decades ago, and depending on the market, it can be very lucrative. So you can imagine taking, in this example, a 4-unit building. Ideally, it already has separate utilities, separate heating systems. But then you work with the city, you get an attorney to divide it up into 4 individually owned condo units, put an HOA in place, get the condo docs done. And let's say you can buy a 4-unit building for $800,000. You put in legal fees and some renovations, and some improvements for $100,000. So now you're into it for $900,000. But people are spending $280,000, $290,000, $300,000 for a decent condo, especially if there's parking. So now maybe it's worth $1 million plus after it's already been condoized. And then you sell them off individually. So that's a real opportunity that works actually in this market. And we're keeping our eyes out for opportunities like that, but you know, they don't come along every day.
And it addresses the missing middle too, right? Like it creates an accessible way to own the space that you're in. We manage a few of those, right, where they are six families that have been turned into condos.
We're also talking about doing the tokenization thing, using the blockchain, where investors can invest just a small portion to own a piece of a larger property. Could be 4 units, could be 40 units. And that's coming along. It's a little bit different than a REIT, a little bit different than a syndication. We're trying to use our ANCAP approach to tokens and the blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So stay tuned for that. It's slowly evolving, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, I want to, like, it was talking about this. I think the one thing we didn't really talk about, Robert I really like your technology piece, by the way. I think that's genius on, you know, the contract codes for your common areas. But just contractors, right? You know, so you talked about like, you know, becoming RRP yourself. But just securing contractors and creating that relationship, or knowing who to bring in versus not, or, you know, those types of things. I know that we've talked about this before, Mark, you and I, you know, when Ledgeview was first started 10 years ago, Matt joined, you know, like a BNI, right? And went to these, you know, there's real estate investments, you know, who are you using? And we still have some of those vendors today, but of course that kind of changes and things like that as the market does, or small businesses move over. But just what everyone's experience has been, or how you've kind of hit the ground in regards to finding the people that can come do the work and maintain your property at the level you want.
All right, well, we're about at 1 hour, and this has been an awesome discussion. I really appreciate all your involvement tonight and participating and sharing your questions and comments. If you have any last questions, speak now or hold your peace. We're going to end this call momentarily. It will be available for replay. If you want a copy, just let Brittany or myself know. We're going to share it with some other fellow investors, but we truly appreciate you guys sharing your wisdom with us tonight. And we wish you happy investing out there.